The moment someone accuses you, something inside you fires up. Your chest tightens. Your mind races to gather evidence, explanations, proof that you are not what they say you are. And right there, in that very instant, you have already lost. You walked straight into the trap. You handed them the power. You made yourself the defendant in a courtroom you never agreed to enter. And the worst part? Nobody remembers your defense. They only remember that you were accused. Every single day, people around you are pulling this trigger. And every single day, you are dancing to their rhythm without even realizing it. But today, that ends. Today, I am going to hand you a weapon that Machiavelli himself would respect. A power move so cold, so calculated, that once you understand it, no one on this earth will ever put you on trial again. Why defense is surrender in disguise. Let me tell you something that will sting before it heals. Every time you defend yourself, you are not proving your innocence. You are confirming your weakness. Think about that. When a king is accused by a peasant, does he gather witnesses? Does he write a letter explaining his side of the story? No. He looks through the peasant, as if the words never reached his ears. And that silence, that terrifying, unbothered stillness, is what keeps the crown on his head. Machiavelli understood this 500 years ago. He wrote that the prince who explains himself to every critic will spend his entire reign explaining and never ruling. Defense is not strength. Defense is submission wearing the mask of courage. The moment you open your mouth to say that is not true or let me explain, you have told the entire room that this accusation has power over you, that it reached something deep inside your chest and made you flinch. And in the game of power, a flinch is a death sentence. People do not remember logic. People remember energy. They remember who looked shaken and who looked unshakable. You could deliver the most perfect, airtight defense ever spoken, and it would not matter because the image of you standing there justifying your existence has already been burned into their minds. You looked like someone on trial. You looked like the accused, and no amount of words will erase that picture. This is the first lesson you must carve into your mind with a blade. Defense is not a strategy, it is a surrender dressed in good grammar. The powerful do not defend. They do not explain. They move in silence and let the results of their life speak with a volume that no accusation can ever match. The psychology behind the attack. Now let me pull back the curtain and show you what is really happening when someone attacks you. Because once you see the machinery behind the manipulation, you will never fall for it again. When a person accuses you, criticizes you, or provokes you in front of others, they are not seeking truth. They already know the truth. What they are seeking is your reaction. That is the prize. Your anger, your frustration, your desperate need to correct the record, that is what they came to collect. It is a psychological extraction. Dark psychology teaches us that provocateurs operate on one principle and one principle alone. Whoever reacts first loses control. They throw the bait into the water not because they are hungry, but because they want to see you thrash. They want the room to watch you flail. The accusation was never the weapon. Your response was the weapon, and they handed it to you knowing you would use it against yourself. This is how manipulators have operated since the beginning of human civilization. They do not need to defeat you physically. They do not need to outsmart you intellectually. All they need is for you to feel something so deeply that you abandon your composure. Because the moment your composure cracks, you are no longer the man in control. You are the man who lost his frame. Machiavelli warned that your enemies will always try to drag you into their arena, because in their arena, their rules apply. The attacker chooses the battlefield when they throw the accusation. And every single time you defend yourself, you are confirming that you accepted their invitation. You showed up to their court, you played their game, and in their game, you were always designed to lose. The Machiavellian power move, strategic silence. So if defense is surrender, what is the power move? What do you do when someone throws fire at your name and waits for you to burn? You do the one thing they never prepared for. You give them nothing. Absolute, cold, devastating silence. Not the silence of a man who has no answer. Not the silence of a man who is afraid. The silence of a man who has weighed the accusation, measured the accuser, and decided that neither is worthy of his energy. This is strategic silence, and it is the most terrifying weapon in the Machiavellian arsenal. When you go silent after an attack, something shifts in the room that you can almost feel physically. The accuser expected resistance. They rehearsed for your comeback. Their entire strategy depended on you opening your mouth. And when you do not, their plan collapses in real time. Suddenly, they are the ones exposed. They are standing in the middle of the room holding a match, and there is nothing to burn. The crowd does not look at you with suspicion. They look at you with fascination, because silence communicates something words never can. It says, I am above this. It says, this accusation is so far beneath me that acknowledging it would be an insult to my own intelligence. Dark psychology confirms that silence triggers deep discomfort in the attacker because human beings are wired to expect a response. When that response never comes, the brain panics. It fills the silence with doubt, insecurity, and fear. Your silence becomes a mirror, and in that mirror, the accuser sees their own smallness reflected back at them. Machiavelli did not preach silence because it was noble. He preached it because it was lethal. The man who masters silence does not avoid conflict. He controls it without ever entering it. Reframe, don't react. Now I need you to understand something. Silence is your shield, but it is not your only weapon. There are moments when the game demands that you speak, and when those moments arrive, you do not defend. You reframe. Reframing is the art of taking the accusation, flipping it in your hands, and throwing it back so cleanly that the attacker suddenly finds themselves on trial. Someone says you are cold and calculated. You do not say, no, I am not. You look at them with still eyes and say, I find it interesting that my discipline makes you uncomfortable. That is a reframe. You did not defend your character, you exposed theirs. You shifted the spotlight without raising your voice, without breaking composure, without giving them a single grain of emotional satisfaction. This is Machiavellian warfare at its finest. The prince does not answer the accusation. He questions the motive behind it. Dark psychology teaches us that every attack has a hidden intention beneath the surface, and when you drag that intention into the open, the attacker loses all power instantly. They were operating in shadows, and you just turned on the lights. Reframing requires something that most men do not have, the ability to pause before reacting. That pause is everything. In that 1 second of stillness between the attack and your response, your entire future is decided. React emotionally, and you become the fool in someone else's story. Reframe strategically, and you become the author of the narrative. The room does not follow the loudest voice, it follows the most controlled one. The man who can take an insult, pause, and redirect the entire conversation without a trace of anger in his voice is the most dangerous man anyone will ever meet. He does not fight fires. He decides which fires are worth lighting. The 48 laws connection: make others come to you. Robert Greene wrote a law that most people read, but very few ever truly absorb. Always make the other person come to you. Use bait if necessary. This law is not just about negotiation or business. It is about every single interaction where power is at stake. When someone attacks you, they are trying to pull you into their territory. They want you chasing, explaining, reacting, running after their approval like a dog chasing a car. It will never catch. And the moment you chase, you have announced to the world that they are the one with value and you are the one begging to be understood. Now flip that. Imagine a man who is accused, and instead of defending, instead of reacting, he simply continues building. He says nothing, he changes nothing, he does not look back. What happens next is pure, dark psychology. The accuser becomes obsessed. The silence eats at them. They start wondering why their attack had no effect. They throw more accusations, louder this time, more desperate, and still they are met with a wall of cold indifference. Eventually, they come to you. They always come to you, because a man who cannot be moved becomes a mystery, and human beings are psychologically incapable of ignoring a mystery. Machiavelli understood that power is not about force, it is about gravity. The sun does not chase the planets. The planets orbit the sun because its mass demands it. When you stop defending, stop explaining, stop reacting, you become the center of gravity in every room you enter. People begin orbiting you, not because you demanded it, but because your stillness created a pull that their minds could not resist. Let them attack. Let them scream into the void. The void does not answer. The void does not care. And that is exactly why the void wins every single time. Emotional detachment, the ultimate armor. Let me tell you the truth that nobody wants to hear. Your emotions are the most exploitable thing about you. Every person who has ever manipulated you, controlled you, or made you feel small did not do it with strength. They did it by accessing your emotions. They found the wire connected to your need for approval, your fear of being misunderstood, your desperate hunger to be seen as good, and they pulled it whenever they wanted to watch you unravel. This is why emotional detachment is not cruelty, it is survival. The Stoics understood this thousands of years ago. Marcus Aurelius ruled an entire empire while being surrounded by betrayal, conspiracy, and constant attack. He did not survive because he fought every battle. He survived because he chose which battles deserved his energy and let everything else dissolve into irrelevance. That is the armor you need to build. Not a wall of anger, not a shield of arrogance, a calm, immovable awareness that what other people say about you is their business, not yours. Dark psychology reveals that manipulators test you before they target you. They throw small provocations first, a subtle insult, a passive-aggressive comment, a backhanded compliment, and they watch. They are studying your wiring. If you react to the small test, they know you will collapse under the real attack. But if you absorb it, like stone absorbs rain, they mark you as untouchable and move on to easier prey. Emotional detachment does not mean you feel nothing. It means you are no longer controlled by what you feel. There is a beast inside every man. The weak man lets the beast run free and calls it passion. The dangerous man keeps the beast on a chain and only releases it when the moment demands destruction. Train yourself to feel everything and react to nothing. That is not coldness. That is supreme, calculated, Machiavellian control. Read the room, not the words. Here is where most men fail and where you are going to separate yourself from every average mind in the room. Most people listen to words. They hear an accusation and they respond to the accusation. They hear a compliment and they accept the compliment. They take everything at face value like children reading the cover of a book and believing they understand the entire story. But you are not going to operate like that anymore. From this moment forward, you are going to read motive, not language. When someone criticizes you in front of a group, the words they use are irrelevant. What matters is why they chose this moment, why they chose this audience, and what they are trying to gain by putting you beneath them. Dark psychology teaches that every human interaction is a transaction. Nobody speaks without a purpose. The colleague who questions your competence in a meeting is not confused about your abilities. They are positioning themselves above you in the social hierarchy. The friend who brings up your past failure during a celebration is not reminiscing. They are threatened by your success and using memory as a weapon to shrink you back down to a size that makes them comfortable. Machiavelli wrote that a wise prince studies the intentions of men more carefully than their declarations. Declarations are performances. Intentions are the script behind the curtain. When you train your mind to see the invisible architecture behind every conversation, you stop reacting to the surface and start operating on a level that most people do not even know exists. You become the man who sees the chessboard while everyone else sees checkers. You stop hearing noise and start decoding strategy. That is not paranoia. That is intelligence refined to its most dangerous form. The man who reads the room never gets ambushed because he saw the attack 3 moves before it was ever launched. Build a reputation that speaks before you do. There is a level of power where you no longer need to silence your critics because your reputation does it for you. Machiavelli considered reputation to be the most valuable currency a man could possess, more powerful than wealth, more dangerous than any army, more persuasive than the most eloquent speech ever delivered. When your name enters a room before your body does, and that name carries weight, the game changes entirely. Nobody accuses a man whose track record makes the accusation sound ridiculous before it even leaves the accuser's mouth. Think about that deeply. If someone calls a proven warrior a coward, the room does not turn to the warrior for a defense. The room turns to the accuser with suspicion because the claim contradicts everything they have already witnessed. That is the fortress you must build. Not with words, not with arguments, but with undeniable results stacked so high that any accusation thrown at you looks absurd standing next to them. Dark psychology confirms that human beings judge credibility through pattern recognition. If every pattern associated with your name signals discipline, competence, and strength, then a single accusation does not just fail, it destroys the person who made it. Their attack becomes their own humiliation because the audience already has a mental file on you and nothing in that file supports the claim. This is why Machiavelli insisted that a prince guard his reputation more fiercely than his borders. Borders can be rebuilt. Armies can be reassembled. But a reputation, once shattered, takes a lifetime to restore. So stop wasting your energy arguing with people who contribute nothing to your legacy. Pour that energy into becoming so undeniably excellent that your existence becomes the only argument you will ever need. Build a name that echoes when you are silent. Build a record that defends you while you sleep. That is not ambition. That is Machiavellian architecture at its highest form. The long game. Patience as a power weapon. Every impulsive man is a defeated man waiting for the moment to arrive. That is not poetry. That is a law of power written in the blood of every king who fell because he could not wait. Patience is not passive. Patience is the most aggressive form of strategy that exists because it requires you to see the finish line while everyone around you is sprinting toward the wrong destination. Machiavelli studied rulers who conquered empires not through speed but through timing. They watched their enemies exhaust themselves. They let alliances crumble on their own. They waited until the perfect fracture appeared, and only then did they move, swiftly, decisively, and without mercy. That is the long game, and the long game is where real power lives. Dark psychology reveals something fascinating about impulsive reactions. When you respond immediately to an attack, your brain is operating from its most primitive region, the part designed for survival, not strategy. You are functioning on adrenaline, not intelligence, and every word you speak in that state is a liability dressed as courage. But the man who absorbs the attack, files it away, and waits for the right moment to respond, or the right moment to do nothing at all, is operating from the highest level of cognitive warfare. He is not ignoring the offense. He is investing it. He is letting time do what arguments never could. Because time reveals everything. Time exposes liars. Time humiliates the reckless. Time vindicates the man who had the discipline to hold his tongue when every nerve in his body screamed for him to strike. The Stoics called this the discipline of delay. Machiavelli called it strategic patience. I call it the difference between a man who wins a battle and a man who wins the entire war. Stop reacting to moments. Start engineering outcomes. The patient man does not play the game faster. He plays it longer. And the man who plays longest always collects everything in the end. Become untouchable. You have now walked through the fire that most men spend their entire lives running from. You understand what they do not. Defense is surrender. Silence is dominance. Reframing is warfare. Emotional detachment is armor. Reading the room is intelligence. Reputation is a fortress. And patience is the deadliest weapon a man can carry without anyone knowing it exists. But let me give you the final piece. The piece that seals everything together and makes you untouchable. You must commit. Not tomorrow. Not when the conditions are perfect. Now. Because knowledge without execution is just entertainment, and you did not come here to be entertained. You came here to be transformed. From this moment forward, you are not the man who explains himself to people who are never going to understand. You are not the man who shrinks to make others comfortable. You are not the man who chases approval from mouths that have never spoken his name with respect. That man is dead. Bury him tonight. The man who replaces him does not argue. He observes. He does not react. He calculates. He does not beg for validation. He builds a life so powerful that validation comes crawling to his door uninvited. Machiavelli wrote for princes, but the principles belong to any man with the discipline to wield them. Dark psychology is not about manipulation. It is about awareness, seeing the game that everyone is playing and choosing your moves with precision instead of emotion. Stoicism is not about suppressing your fire. It is about directing that fire with surgical accuracy so that nothing burns except what you intended to destroy. You are now the man who walks into the room and changes its temperature without saying a single word. You are the man who cannot be baited, cannot be rattled, and cannot be reduced by the opinions of those who have never built anything worth defending. You are untouchable. Now I want you to prove it. Drop a comment right now with the words, "I am the silence they cannot break," and let that be your declaration to the world that the old version of you no longer exists. If this monologue ignited something inside your chest that you have never felt before, hit that like button and let the algorithm know this message deserves to spread. Subscribe to this channel because this is not the last time you will need these words. And turn on notifications so that every time we release a new weapon for your mind, you are the first one to receive it. The war for your power has already begun. Now go and make them remember your silence louder than they ever remembered their noise.